Hey, welcome back. This is Week 5 Fantasy Central. This is your host, the one, the only, the Oracle himself, Zach Hall, and I'm here with our very own fantasy guru, Hefe.
Hey, let's go. How's everybody doing this week?
I hope they're doing good. First, I want to say last week I was battling an illness, but I grinded it out, pushed through it, was able to get on the mic for not only Fantasy Central, but for the Horsemen Pro Football Talk as well. So I want to thank everybody who reached out, checked in, and provided some encouraging words. You guys are truly awesome. And this is why we do what we do, because you guys are just great. So thank you. Um, all right, let's talk about week 4 real quick. Another interesting week last weekend in the fantasy world. Mr. Tyreek Hill dropped a 50 banger on the Eagles with 11 catches, 186 yards, 3 touchdowns on 12 targets. Speaking of 3 touchdowns, Cordarrelle Patterson had a 35-point day with 5 catches, 3 of which were for touchdowns. Debo Samuel and DJ Moore also dropped 35 points with a couple of touchdowns. And Sam Darnold, once again, another great performance, rushing and running for a total of 4 touchdowns on the day. Well, what do you think about that, Hefe? How'd you do in fantasy?
I did pretty well this week. You talked about Tyreek Hill and DJ Moore. They were wide receiver 1 and 3 this week. They were both on my starting lineup. So
Nice.
that was pretty nice. Yeah, I wish I would have started Tyler Boyd. If I would have started Tyler Boyd this week, I would have had three of the top 10 wide receivers in my lineup. But started Keenan Allen instead. But it was a pretty good week. I ended up with 197 points in my league. Which is a little more. I had to have different, touchdown bonuses, 50 plus yard touchdown bonuses and stuff. So Tyreek Hill in normal leagues dropped. I think it would have been like 47 or something like that. But still, really good week for those guys. And Patterson, who saw that coming? I think he only had 12 opportunities. He had 6 targets and 6 rushes and had 3 touchdowns. That is insane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's awesome, man. I'm glad you did well. I think I won in your league, or maybe it's vice versa. One of my leagues I won in, the other league I was projected to dominate midway through Sunday, and then it all came collapsing down towards the end. And I ended up losing by a significant amount. That's just the way my luck has been this year, but it is what it is. Regardless, I'm glad you did well. I hope everybody else out there did pretty well. But enough about week 4. You ready to move on to week 5?
Yeah, let's get into it, man.
All right. We got a good show for you guys today. Lots of in depth analysis that we think will benefit you in your fantasy matchup this week. We're going to start with Hefe's top waiver wire picks, head into his top 10 running backs and wide receivers for the week, and finish up with some surefire startums and situms. So without further ado, let's get to it. Week 5 waiver wire. Lots of injuries over the weekend. In one of my leagues, I have 6 guys that are questionable for this weekend. So if you're in need of a replacement, who are you looking at grabbing on the wire this week, Hefe?
So at quarterback, I'm thinking Trey Lance. Okay, this is guy. If you watched any of our preseason shows, I'm high on Trey Lance. I think he's going to be very good in the NFL, and I think he's going to play well enough while Jimmy G's out. Not Jimmy G. They're talking about he might be able to play, but he was talking about maybe being out a couple weeks. So I assume he's going to be out at least this game. And I think Trey Lance has a chance to ball out. Then like I said, this might be a 1 week replacement, but I think he's a must add. He's somebody, he only played a half football and he had 20 points and he only completed 9 passes, and a lot of that was on the deep shots of Debo Samuel. But Debo Samuel is going to continue to be explosive. We've seen it, so I think Trey Lance is an obvious need to pick up. Somebody we talked about last week at quarterback is Taylor Heineke. I think he's somebody that needs to be rostered in every league, and he showed it this week. He went from quarterback 17 last week to quarterback 15 this week. He had 27.9 in his last game here against the Falcons. And just like I was talking about last week with him, this team is going to have to pass the ball. The defense is just not very good this year for whatever reason. So Taylor Heineke, between his passing value and his rushing value, which he is doing more of over the last couple of weeks, Taylor Heineke needs to be rostered in pretty much every league, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. He's definitely played very well the few games that he's been in this season, and at this point, yeah, he's looking good. So I agree with that. I do like Trey Lance. I think he's very explosive. Obviously, we don't know exactly how good he is or what he's capable in this league, but the few glimpses we have seen so far this season has proven that he can get the job done. I think he will. He should become one of those electrifying quarterbacks, and it's going to be fun to watch. So I like both of those. All right, moving on. Who's your next guy on the wire?
So next, we're going to talk about some running backs here. First up, the obvious one right now, Samaje Perine. Joe Mixon went from a week-to-week consideration to day-to-day consideration, but we saw last week with Joe Mixon, there was a 7-week stretch where he was week to week. So the Bengals just are very vague with their injury reports, and so it's unclear what's going to happen. I would expect Mixon to probably miss this upcoming game if I had to assume, or if he does play, he'll be limited. So Samaje Perine should be good. If Joe Mixon misses, he should have a pretty good week. I would assume be involved in the passing game. He's obviously going to be the lead rusher there. So Samaje Perine, a guy that if you need him at least for a week and you have somebody you can drop, go ahead, pick Perine up for a week. Next up is going to be Damian Williams, who is going to have a little more long-term value. It just came out a little bit before we started this recording that David Montgomery is going to be out 4 to 5 weeks. So we know in the past, Damian Williams, in the roles he's had, he's been good in the receiving back role, and he's about to take over the lead rushing role. And his limited opportunity after Montgomery went down in this last game, I think he averaged 6.3 yards per carry. So with Nagy not calling the plays, I think Damian Williams has a very good opportunity to have some value and really pretty good borderline RB1 value, actually, in my opinion, while Montgomery is out.
Yeah, I am unfortunately one of those guys who lost David Montgomery on both my teams. Yeah, and on one of my other teams, I also have Mixon. So this is the week where I'm really, this is the week I'm really looking at running back. So yeah, those are the two replacements, and you can't go wrong there. They're definitely guys I'm considering looking at because I have to look at them due to my unfortunate situation at the present moment.
Yeah, very unfortunate. At least both of them look like they're about to get heavy workload. So if you can get one of them, that's good news.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on. Who else you got on the wire?
All right, so now we get into a couple of receivers here where I want to start with Darnell Mooney. Kind of like I just mentioned with Damian Williams, Matt Nagy is not calling the plays. And the first week with Nagy not calling the plays, the Bears offense looked to get better. And assuming that can continue, we don't know who the starting quarterback's going to be. Nagy said it's going to be Dalton if he's healthy, so I assume Dalton, but if he's not playing, obviously Fields. But I think the offense is getting better, and it doesn't seem to matter who the quarterback is. Darnell Mooney, over the first 4 games, is the leader for the Bears in targets, yards, catches, basically all the major receiving categories over Allen Robinson. He has the speed to be the deep threat, which we saw this past week. So I think Darnell Mooney should be rostered in every league going forward. Seems like he's the new number 1 there, at least right now, for the Bears. Another receiver who seems to be taking a number 1 role on a team that's probably going to pass a lot is Cleef Raymond. Jared Goff seems to be comfortable with him. And for a team that doesn't have a whole lot going for him at receiver, any receiver that popped up, we were going to jump on, and Cleef Raymond seems to be that guy. Him and Goff are building a rapport, and he had a pretty good game. He had 19.6 here in his last game. So Cleef Raymond, somebody that if you're going to need help or you want to add some depth at receiver, Cleef Raymond could be that guy. And last but not least, we're going to finish it off with John Ross coming back for the Giants after being on the IR, and he had a good first game. And obviously, this is because of Shepard and Slayton being out. Monitor those injuries. Don't know when those guys are coming back. But even still, I think there's going to be some value for John Ross. I think he's going to be able to stretch the field for this team, which is something they hadn't really had. They have a lot of good receivers, but hadn't really had that speedy deep threat. And I think John Ross can be that guy, especially, Slayton's in and out of the lineup. I guess he's been known to be that deep threat, but he's been inconsistent. So hopefully John Ross can find a spot in this lineup. And Daniel Jones just showed this past week he's not afraid to throw that ball up to him. So John Ross, again, if you need depth, if you need a replacement, John Ross could be a good one for you.
Yeah, I like it. I definitely think that the Giants wide receivers are going to have a fantastic day this weekend, which we'll get to later on my surefire stardom situms list. But I like all three of those: Mooney, Cleef Raymond, and John Ross. They could definitely bring you some value there if you're in need of a wide receiver this week. So, all right, that wraps up the waiver wire segment. We're going to move on to Jeffe's top 10 running backs for week 5 of fantasy football. We'll start here at number 10.
Number 10 guy that we were just talking about from the waiver wire is going to be Damien Williams. I mentioned that he could be RB1 borderline, and I think he's going to get it. With Montgomery out and Nagy not calling the plays, I just think that offense works better with Nagy not calling the plays. We even saw it last year when Nagy stopped calling the plays, that offense looked better. So, with the Raiders of 26th against running backs, and I expect Damian Williams to have heavy usage here and to be able to be a top 10 running back. And he might even be, if he gets, 2 touchdowns in this game, he might even be higher than 10. But I think he's a top 10 running back this week. Number 9 is going to be James Robinson. Same spot I had him at last week. He had a pretty good week last week. They're going up against Tennessee. And Tennessee has a pretty suspect secondary, so I feel like teams pass more against them than run, but they're 12th against running backs. And look, James Robinson, as long as they continue to use James Robinson the way they have, which seems like they will. Last week, Carlos Hyde was a healthy scratch from that game, which is great news for people who invested in James Robinson. He should be RB1 pretty much every week, probably going to be in this list somewhere pretty much every week, but I have him at 9 this week going against the Titans. Number 8 for me this week is going to be Jonathan Taylor going against Baltimore. He's coming off a 100-yard game. We finally saw him have a really good game. And, unfortunately, the passing game usage isn't where we'd like it to be right now. But after Nyheim Hines muffed a punt in that Dolphins game, we really didn't see Nyheim on the field. And if that's a trend that's going to continue, and we see a lot of Jonathan Taylor, I think that this Baltimore pass rush could force some checkdowns to Jonathan Taylor. So hopefully, like I said, hopefully we see Jonathan Taylor on the field like we did last week, and less Nyheim Hines. As much as I like Nyheim, if you invest in Jonathan Taylor, you want him on the field. Baltimore is 23rd against running backs. And like I said, I think there's going to be a reason for there to be dump offs in this game. So I think JT can be a top 10 back.
Yeah, he's definitely showing that. And I love Hines. We've talked about him before on both the podcasts. But yeah, after that muff punt, it kind of, he wasn't in the game a whole lot. He didn't really do a whole lot. But he's more than capable of coming out there and making plays. Unfortunately, Jonathan Taylor is just showing just how good he is. Last year, he was the 3rd best running back in the entire league, and he's stepping up in the passing game as well. So we'll recap real quick. Number 10, you have Damian Williams. Number 9, James Robinson. Number 8, Jonathan Taylor. Let's move on to number 7.
Number 7 is going to be Najee Harris. And I wanted to put him higher, right, because his usage and his catching, it's out of this world right now. But he's going up against Denver, who is 1st in the league against running backs, which, being number 7 against the 1st-ranked defense against running backs, you got to be pretty good, right? So he's still going to have a decent game. He, with the usage that he gets, he's bound to have a top 10 week again. But I think he's going to slide down a little bit. But, anybody who, if you're a top 10 running back, then you're a starter for somebody. So Najee Harris going to have another good week, just like he probably will. If he has a really good fantasy day here, like a top 5 fantasy day, then we're looking at, like, what would that be? 2017 Le'Veon Bell. from Najee Harris this year. He's looking really good for the Steelers. And a guy that honestly I was skeptical about, but won't be anymore, is Ezekiel Elliott coming in at number 6. They play the Giants this week, who are 18th against running backs, and Zeke is eating right now. Tony Pollard seems to be getting phased out in a way, but Zeke is making the most of it. He's been dominating, especially against a Panthers defense that seemed for real, right? But he just ate up, had 140 something rushing yards against him. So Zeke, I hope, can get more pass game usage. But even without it, it seems like he's going to be getting in the end zone. And I think the Giants defense isn't as great as we thought it would be. So Zeke should have a pretty good week here against them.
All right. We have some dissension in the ranks.
Okay.
One of those guys I have on my sit-em list this week. Care to take a guess?
Najee Harris.
That is correct. Yeah, I have Harris on my sit-em list this week. I just feel that the Steelers' offense is just stagnant right now. His only upside really is the passing game ability, and he was getting hell of fantasy value off that last week. But the Broncos are one of the best defenses in the league, if not the best defense, both running-wise and passing-wise. So personally, I'm staying away from Harris this week. I think he's going to have it tough either way. I don't think the Steelers receivers are going to do much. They're not going to get the ground game running. It's going to be a pretty poor performance overall for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So personally, I'm staying away from Harris. What do you think?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. And I think this is a game where, Teddy Two Gloves probably going to be out. So I think the Steelers are going to be able to stay in it because the Broncos won't be able to get anything going on offense. And even if the Broncos do get ahead, which I do think the Broncos will get ahead at some point, when it comes down to catch-up mode, Najee Harris is going to see a lot of targets. We can just expect him to continue to see targets because Ben can't push the ball downfield. So I think no matter how the game script goes, I feel like any given week there's going to be an avenue for Najee Harris to have a really good week.
He very well may. I guess we'll see how it all plays out this week. Really, that's their only option, so he may have some value there. So we'll see. All right, so 7, you have Najee Harris. Number 6, Ezekiel Elliott. We'll move on to number 5.
Yep, breaking into the top 5 here, we're going to have Dalvin Cook going against Detroit. I thought about putting him higher, but I felt like this was a pretty good spot. Detroit is 29th against running backs, and I feel like the Vikings are probably going to be playing ahead for most of this game, and Dalvin Cook is more than capable of busting off 160 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns on the ground. I feel like he's going to have a huge day. He's going to assert his dominance in front of his home crowd. Dalvin Cook, an easy top 5 for me this week. I have Austin Eckler coming in at number 4, going against Cleveland. Now, Cleveland is second against running backs. Their defense is looking really good over the last few weeks. It's been tough for teams to get in the end zone against Cleveland. But Austin Eckler is pretty much matchup proof, right? Kind of the same thing we were talking about with Najee Harris. Like Austin Eckler, his nickname, as they said many times on Monday Night Football, is pound for pound. And he shows it. He's pound for pound, just one of the strongest people in the NFL. He's a great runner. Very, he has the passing game usage. A lot of fantasy people know the passing game usage is there, but he's an underrated runner, and he's very strong and can break through tackles. So I think Austin Eckler just has to be in my top 5. He's so good. And number 3 here is going to be Saquon Barkley, who there was some skepticism of even last week after a good week. I know we had talked about it. You were a little skeptical on him being inside top 10, but the only running back that was better than him last week was Cordell Patterson with his 3 touchdowns. So Saquon being back to Saquon, I know a lot of people talk about his averages aren't there. But if you look at Saquon's pretty much entire career, what makes Saquon is he beats it and beats it and beats it, and then he ends up beating the defense for a huge touchdown. So as long as that value is there and that explosiveness is there, Saquon looks to be back to being Saquon. He's on the field a bunch and he's getting the usage. And look, if the Giants are down, which they probably will be against Dallas, you have to imagine Saquon is going to get a decent amount of targets, decent amount of catches, and when he's in open space, he can make things happen. So Saquon is my number 3 this week.
Yeah, so I will admit I was incorrect on Saquon last week. I had him on my sit list. He ended up dropping a 30 bomb on me. So I was incorrect. Jeffe, you were right. His passing game value proved to be the difference there, and he definitely showed out. I actually started to put him on my sit list for this week because I don't particularly like the run game matchup with Dallas. However, because he is so explosive and because of his passing game upside, I took him off my list there. So I agree with you. Dalvin Cook, Austin Eckler, and Saquon Barkley are your 5, 4, and 3. Can't go wrong with any of those guys. All right, so number 2.
Yep, breaking into these top 2 is going to be Nick Chubb coming in at number 2. They're playing the Chargers, and we know the Chargers they can be had on the ground. And we know that this Cleveland team loves to run the ball. And even though Nick Chubb, he doesn't have the passing game usage, obviously they're using Kareem Hunt for that. But Nick Chubb is a great runner. He's one of the best pure runners in the NFL, coming off a 100-yard game. And, assuming that he can get into the end zone at least once. I think he can do it a couple times here in this game. I think it's going to be a hard-fought game here with the Chargers, but they're going to lean on Nick Chubb because they're going to want that Chargers offense to stay on the sideline, in my opinion. So Nick Chubb, I feel like is going to have a big-time week here and come in at the number 2 running back. And number 1 running back, the name we haven't heard, everybody knows it's coming. It's going to be Derrick Henry. His usage right now is just ridiculous. The amount of carries he's getting every game is absolutely insane. He has 510 yards through the first 4 games of the season. So the number 1 back, he's once again playing a bad team. The Jets are 21st, or I'm sorry, the Jaguars are 21st against. I don't think I changed that actually. Oopsie. Yeah, because they're playing Jacksonville this week, right?
I do believe so, yeah. They lost to the Jets last week.
So with Derrick Henry playing another bad team in the Jacksonville Jaguars, you have to imagine they're going to lean on him again. He's going to do what he does, especially against the Jaguars. If you look back at Derrick Henry against the Jaguars, that's where the 99-yard rush came, where he hoed the entire team. I mean, Derrick Henry regularly does the Jaguars dirty, so he's an obvious number 1 pick this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And Henry's the bulk of the Tennessee Titans offense, especially with Julio Jones and AJ Brown being out last week. I think Julio's going to be back this week, but AJ Brown should still be out. So Henry's definitely going to get his. They have to run through Derrick Henry. He is that important to them, so he'll get his. And Nick Chubb, I actually have on my stardom list this week. As well as Kareem Hunt. I think both of those guys against the Chargers, look, they're the best running tandem in the league, and they're running against one of the worst run defenses. There's no reason not to start either one of these guys, in my opinion, against the Chargers. I wouldn't be surprised if both of them get their hands on the ball at least 20 times a piece, whether it's through the air or on the ground.
That wouldn't surprise me at all, actually. Yeah, I could definitely see that.
All right. You want to recap your top 10 list real quick?
Yeah. So starting at 10, we have Damian Williams, who is, if you get lucky enough to pick him up on the waiver wire, good for you. I have him as a top 10 pick this week. James Robinson coming in at 9, going against Tennessee. Jonathan Taylor against Baltimore on Monday Night Football is number 8. Number 7, Najee Harris going against Denver's tough defense. Number 6 is Ezekiel Elliott eating against the Giants. Number 5, Dalvin Cook against Detroit. Number 4 is Austin Eckler. Number 3, Saquon Barkley going against Dallas. Nick Chubb comes in at number 2, and Derrick Henry, number 1 once again.
There you have it. Jeffe's week 5 top 10 running backs for fantasy football. Let's move on to his top 10 wide receivers. We'll start off at number 10.
Number 10 this week for me is going to be Devonte Parker going up against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, I mean, the injuries for their secondary. Carlton Davis came into the game with a hamstring injury that he was nursing and left the game with what seems to be a pretty severe groin injury. So another big hit for them right after they signed Richard Sherman. So Devonte Parker, I think, is going to be able to have a good week. I expect the Dolphins to get down in this game for them to use him. And what we saw in the Colts-Dolphins game was in garbage time when Jacoby just needed to throw it up and get yards. He was throwing it to Parker, but Parker was going up to make the catches. You know, he made some good plays in that game. And so I expect that to continue. When they get down in this game and Jacoby needs a play, he'll throw it to Parker. And this Bucs secondary isn't very good, so I think Parker can make some plays. So Devonte Parker, I think, can be a top 10 wide receiver this week. Number 9 for me is going to be Marvin Jones. I had him in this same spot last week, and he disappointed against a Cincinnati defense that continues to get better. But he's going up against the Tennessee secondary, and I expect the Jags to be down. Tennessee is 31st in the league against wide receivers after 4 weeks. And with DJ Chark out of the lineup for the foreseeable future and Trevor Lawrence continuing to get better as we go on, I think Jones, at least when they play bad teams, Jones will be able to have good fantasy days. So I think Jones is a top 10 guy, comes in at number 9 for me. Number 8 here is going to be Tyler Lockett, who exploded on the scene in the first couple weeks and has kind of disappeared over the last couple. But I do think against the Rams, I think Jalen Ramsey is going to be locking up DK Metcalf. And I think the Rams are going to get up on the Seahawks. I think the Seahawks will be trailing and will need to pass. And with DK locked up, that's going to push a lot of targets to Tyler Lockett. I could see him having 12 or more targets in this game. And with him being a deep threat and being shifty in the secondary, I can see him breaking out for a big touchdown. So I think Tyler Lockett has a top 10 week.
Yeah, I really like Devonte Parker here, as well as Jalen Waddle. Tampa Bay boasts the best running defense in the league, and with a pair of struggling running backs, the Dolphins really have no choice but to throw the ball. That's great news for anybody who owns Jalen Waddle or Devonte Parker, because Tampa has the worst passing defense in the league. So if I have either one of those guys, I'm definitely playing them. So yeah, I agree with you on number 10, Devonte Parker. Number 9, you have Marvin Jones Jr. Number 8, Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett's explosive. He's more than capable of raking in a couple touchdowns any game of the week. So all right, number 7.
Number 7, I was kind of surprised that I had him this low. I hadn't even really considered him for the positions above this, but Devante Adams coming in at number 7 going against Cincinnati. Cincinnati is 17th in the league against wide receivers. And, look, Devonte Adams is going to get his, right? He's pretty much a lock for top 10 most weeks, pretty much every week of the season. He's going to get red zone targets. Aaron loves to look at Devonte in the red zone. So, you had to put him up here somewhere. I think 7 seems like a pretty good spot for him this week, because I do like Cincy's defense. I do think they continue to get better. They have a pretty good secondary, but Devonte had to be a top 10, so he comes in at number 7 for me this week. Number 6 is actually the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy, Cooper Kupp, going against Seattle here. Seattle's 22nd against wide receivers, and we saw Cooper Kupp come back down to earth a little bit. And look, it was going to be hard to sustain 30 plus fantasy points every game, right? That's just not realistic. And what I think is going to diminish his value a little bit, he still seems like the number 1 wide receiver there and should continue to be. But Van Jefferson and Deshaun Jackson and Tyler Higbee are taking targets. And you can't forget about Robert Woods, who had a garbage time touchdown and finally got on the board for the season. But Cooper Kupp, I think there's going to be things that limit his potential and what we know he can do. He's probably still going to have a couple games this year where he's looking at 30 points. But I think the more, 15 to 25 is more what we can expect from a week to week for Cooper Kupp. So he's coming in at number 6 for me this week.
Yeah, you know how I feel about Devante Adams. He's an every week kind of guy. He's always going to get his targets and more than capable of getting a touchdown in any game. Same thing with Cooper Kupp. But yeah, like you said, if you have Cooper Kupp and you're not starting him every single week at this point, you should just quit playing fantasy football altogether. And the worst game yet this season, last week, he was able to still put up 11 points, which, I mean, it's all right, but this week he should be able to put up big numbers against a very weak Seattle secondary. So I like both of those picks in your top 10. Number 7, Devonte Adams. Number 6, Cooper Kupp. Let's move on to number 5.
So cracking up into the top 5, a guy that I keep putting in my top 10 at some point. If he can't do it here, I'm going to stop putting him in the top 10 and just admit that I was completely wrong about this guy. It was Calvin Ridley going up against the Jets. And look, the Jets are 3rd against wide receivers. That stat is very misleading because people get up on the Jets and just run the ball. So this game is two not as great teams, right? Not very good. So I think it'll be a little more competitive in a way. And Calvin Ridley should see a decent amount of targets. With Marcus May not being in the secondary for the Jets, that was like the only hope they had of really stopping some deep balls. But Marcus May is on the IR and dealing with legal troubles. And so I think Calvin Ridley has an opportunity to have not only his normal usage, he gets pretty good usage as a number 1 receiver. It's just we're not seeing the touchdown production, but I think he can get a long touchdown in this game plus his normal usage. So Calvin Ridley cracks the top 5 for me this week. And number 4 is going to be Debo Samuel, looking like an absolute savage out there. I mean, he gets so many targets every week, and we saw it's not going to matter who the quarterback is. Debo Samuel is just going to continue to make plays. And if you've realized, there on 2 of his touchdowns this year, it's been long touchdowns where in coverage, nobody's anywhere near him. And so Kyle Shanahan, his offense is designed to confuse the defenses, and it's been working. They're getting Debo Samuel open way down the field for huge touchdowns. So now, that's probably not going to happen every week, but Arizona is 25th against wide receivers. This is a huge game that they're going to want to win. This is a division matchup. So Debo Samuel, I feel like, is going to have a very good week again and is my number 4. Number 3 here, might be a little biased, but this guy seems to be matchup proof at this point, and it's DJ Moore going against Philadelphia. And we saw Philadelphia, I've talked a lot about in these first few weeks about some stats being misleading. Well, Philadelphia going into the Chiefs game was 1st in the league against wide receivers. They come out of the league, come out of week 4, 8th against wide receivers. So they came back down to earth a little bit. I think DJ Moore is going to be able to expose Darius Slay the same way Tyreek did. Now, I don't expect DJ Moore to absolutely go off for 11 and 187 and 3 touchdowns. That's unrealistic. But I think DJ Moore has been very consistent. Darnold is really liking throwing to him, and it's working for him, especially if McCaffrey's back in the lineup this week and the team you see Philly having to pay attention to that, then DJ Moore should have a very good week.
Yeah, absolutely. DJ Moore, Debo Samuel, both been balling out. I like both of those guys right there. You hit the nail on the head with both of them. Calvin Ridley's a kind of question mark. However, he's still averaging 14, 15 fantasy points a game. And we just know with how talented he is and how good Matt Ryan can be, that he's just waiting to explode and put up a huge 20, 30-point game. So that can come any game this year. But so I like that. Number 5, you have Calvin Ridley. Number 4, Debo Samuel. Number 3, DJ Moore. Let's move on to your top 2. Number 2.
Number 2 is going to be Tyreek Hill. And this one was tough, right? Because Buffalo, after another strong week, they moved into 1st in the league against wide receivers. But Patrick Mahomes is not Davis Mills. He's going to be able to pass the ball. And I expect this to be a shootout, right? And in these big games, that's when the stars shine the brightest. So I think Tyreek Hill is going to have another really good week. Now, we've seen Tyreek Hill have two 40-point weeks, 40 or more point weeks, and two not very good weeks. I think it was 10 and 5 that we saw from him. So, hopefully this is another very good game. I have Tyreek, so I hope I'm right here. But I just think this is going to be a shootout kind of game. I think both these teams are going to put up some points, and I think Tyreek Hill, like I said, the stars come out. Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce should have good games for the Chiefs. So Tyreek Hill is my number 2 receiver this week. Number 1 is going to be a receiver in that same game, and it's going to be Stefon Diggs. And the reason I have Stefon above Tyreek here is because Josh Allen, look, this is going to be former MVP Patrick Mahomes against future MVP Josh Allen, right? And I think Josh Allen is going to be able to get the job done. Casey's secondary right now their entire defense has looked pretty suspect over these first 4 games. They're 18th in the league against wide receivers, and it's time. Stefon Diggs had a pretty good game this last game, and I think Josh Allen in the most important game of the season so far is going to be looking for his best receiver a lot, and I think it's going to work. I think Stefon Diggs is going to have 2, maybe even 3 touchdowns in this game. Like I said, I think there are going to be a lot of points scored. So Stefon Diggs is my number 1 wide receiver in week 5.
Yeah, I can't argue with either one of those guys. This will be a shootout. It's going to be extremely high scoring. And I also have Stefon Diggs on my must start, as well as Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders for that matter. I think Buffalo is going to be able to establish a good run game early and kind of keep the Chiefs guessing and being on their heels. So either 1, 2, or all 3 of those guys are going to have a good day against this poor Chiefs passing defense. And like you said, it's going to be a shootout, both sides of the ball. So Tyreek Hill, he's always going to get hurt and he's probably one of the most he is the most electric wide receiver out there right now in the game. I would say he's number 1, but Cooper Kupp has proven that over the last few years, few games, I should say. So yeah, I agree. Both of those guys, it's going to be a hell of a game and an extremely fun one to watch. All right. You want to recap your top 10 real quick?
Yep. So coming in at number 10 is Devonte Parker going up against the league's worst secondary. Got him at number 10. Number 9 is Marvin Jones going up against Tennessee, the second worst passing defense in the league. Number 8 is Tyler Lockett on Thursday Night Football. Number 7, Devante Adams in a big game against Cincinnati. Number 6 is Cooper Kupp, again on Thursday Night Football. Calvin Ridley cracks into the top 5 going against the Jets here. Debo Samuel, no surprise, coming in at number 4 against Arizona. DJ Moore is going to be a top 3 this week, coming in at number 3 against Philly. Number 2, Tyreek Hill against Buffalo. And number 1, Stefon Diggs against Kansas City.
There it is. Hefe's top 10 wide receivers for week 5 of fantasy football. All right, let's hit on some guys we didn't talk about yet so far. This is my surefire week 5 start 'em, sit 'em list. I'm going to start with the running backs who you must start this week. The first one I have here is Darrell Henderson Jr. for the Los Angeles Rams against the Seattle Seahawks. There's a reason the Seahawks have the second most rushing plays ran against them this season, and it's not because they have a good secondary. The Seahawks are giving up a league-leading 152 yards a game, so I expect the Rams to take advantage and give Henderson the ball early before this becomes an air raid shootout later on in the game. What do you think?
Yeah, I was thinking about the same thing. I thought about where I have Damian Williams. I thought about putting Darrell Henderson there because I think the same thing. I think they're going to be able to take advantage of the Seahawks, especially on Thursday Night Football. I think McVay is going to want to go a little more run heavy, at least early in that game, keep Russell Wilson off the field and from getting in a rhythm with that offense. So I think Darrell Henderson is a very good play this week.
All right. Moving on to the next one, Tuba Hubbard for the Carolina Panthers against the Philadelphia Eagles. Christian McCaffrey is still expected to miss week 5, so Hubbard should continue to fill in the role. Although he did lose some of his passing game work to Rodney Smith last week, I think the opportunity for a big rushing game against a very poor Eagles run defense is in store for Hubbard here.
Yeah, I want to see what happens, by the time somebody's listening to this, it's already Thursday, but it's Tuesday as we're recording this. We're supposed to see if McCaffrey can practice on Wednesday. It's been rumored that they're going to see if he can go, and if he can go, there's a chance he plays Sunday. But yeah, if he doesn't, of course, Chuba Hubbard, you'd be crazy to take him out. I know he's not going to get the Christian McCaffrey numbers that we were hoping, and that was proven this past week. So, I think, temper expectations, but he's at least a running back too for somebody. He's got to be.
Heard that. All right, and then I got one more on the list. This is a tandem coming in here with Devin Singletary and Zack Moss for the Buffalo Bills against the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs have given up 8 rushing touchdowns in 4 games and an average of 146 yards on the ground, including over 5 yards per rush. That's great news for Bills running backs Devin Singletary and Zack Moss, both of whom had over 15 touches apiece last week. So look for the Bills to utilize a run game early to keep the Chiefs guessing and open up that passing game.
Yeah, I think I might be a little biased on Devin Singletary because I drafted him 2 years in a row and he disappointed me 2 years in a row. But Zack Moss, I feel like Zack Moss has just done better with the touches he's been given, and he's scoring the touchdowns, right? Like when you get to the goal line, are you going to put Singletary in over Moss? There's no way. Moss is huge. You got to put Moss in, and Moss has, for the most part, been getting the touchdowns. And so I think, when that opportunity comes up, I think there's more value for Moss, especially because, over the last 3 weeks, the touches have been split fairly evenly between both backs. But Moss just has the touchdown upside that I like, and he gets receiving work too. It's not like all the receiving work goes to Devin Singletary. This isn't a Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt situation. So I think there's a lot of value for Moss and Singletary. I guess if you're desperate in need, especially in a 12 or 14 team league, a little bit deeper, Singletary could be a running back too, but I'm just less confident that he'll be able to score touchdowns and give you that production.
Understandable. All right, that's my week 5 stardom for the running backs. Let's stick with the running backs. We'll go to the sit-ems, the guys you want to avoid this week. First on this list is another tandem I have here, Myles Gaskins and Malcolm Brown for the Miami Dolphins. This Dolphins rushing attack has been very poor so far this year. Gaskins has only 142 yards and 0 touchdowns. Malcolm Brown has only 91 yards and a touchdown. The Bucs run defense took over the number 1 spot in my rankings this week, having only given up 1 rushing touchdown on the season and an average of 47 yards a game. So I'm avoiding these guys at all costs.
At all costs. There's no way, even against the worst rushing defense, I'm not starting either of these guys for the Dolphins. Their rushing game just isn't there, especially against the Bucs here. There's no way in it. I mean, even if the Bucs could people just don't game plan to run on the Bucs. We've seen it pretty much every game with the Bucs. Everybody's taking advantage of the secondary. Like even the Patriots, who are usually a run heavy team, seem like they didn't even game plan to run the ball. They were just letting Mac Jones pass the ball a bunch. That's the game plan. Playing the Bucs is to pass the ball, and there's not even pass game usage for these running backs. So, neither. I'd stay away from both of them all season.
All right, next one I have on my list here is Antonio Gibson for the Washington football teams against the New Orleans Saints. Gibson has had a solid few weeks against the Bills and the Falcons, but I don't like the matchup here this week against the Saints, who boast the second best run defense in the league. They've given up 2 rushing touchdowns on the season and an average of only 66 yards a game. I'd sit Gibson and look for better value this week.
Yeah, I thought about the same thing. The reason I don't have Antonio Gibson in the top 10 running backs and the reason I don't have McLaurin in the top 10 wide receivers is because kind of what we talked about in the Pro Football Talk episode is that the Saints are an every other week team right now. Like I feel like their defense is going to come out and be the league's best defense this week and not give up anything. And I think Antonio Gibson is probably going to give out, somewhere between 10 and 15 points because he does have some passing game value, and they might get down in this game, probably going to get down because the Washington defense is so bad. But Yeah, I agree. I'm skeptical on Antonio Gibson this week.
All right, and this last one I have here is Clyde Edwards-Helaire for the Kansas City Chiefs against the Buffalo Bills. Like we've already said, this game is going to be an absolute shootout, and that means Mahomes and the Chiefs are going to be looking to air it out in a game in which I think they'll be trailing, to be honest with you. So I don't like Clyde Edwards-Helaire this week against the Bills, especially with the Buffalo Bills having a top 5 rush defense.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. I know people are riding high on him. The last 2 games for CEH has been a good refreshment for people that invested in him. It didn't look good the first couple games of the season, but I'm with you. I don't like the matchup. I don't think the game script is going to be in favor of CEH being able to get the ball, and there's not enough passing game value for CEH for me to be comfortable with him. If you drafted him with where he was getting drafted, you're hoping he can at least be an RB2 this week. But I think he's just going to be low enough in the running back rankings this weekend to be, even a skeptical flex play.
All right, there it is. That's my running back setums for week 5. We'll move on to week 5 startums for the wide receivers. The first one I'm going to start off with here is Kenny Golladay for the New York Giants against the Dallas Cowboys. Last week, Golladay had his first 20-point performance of the year with 6 catches, 116 yards on 7 targets. I anticipate those numbers to go up against the Dallas Cowboys and their 31st ranked passing defense in a game the Giants should be trying to play catch up in.
Yeah, I could see that. It'd be nice to see if Galladay can do it consistently. After the game he just had, and with the injuries to the other wide receivers, he seems like a must start. He draws a tough matchup against Trayvon Diggs. Is Kenny Galladay as good as DJ Moore? I don't know. Like I said, I want to see it consistently from Kenny Galladay, but again, with the situations are situational, and with the situation around Kenny Galladay, you have to start him. And yeah, I agree. He should probably have a pretty good week.
All right, next one here is Julio Jones for the Tennessee Titans against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Julio Jones is expected to be back after last week's embarrassing loss to the Jets. I expect the Titans to get their other superstar receiver going early in this game against a pretty shitty Jaguars secondary.
Yeah, if they can't get the passing game going against this secondary, like at this point in the season, you've had time to gel and get together and work together and get in a rhythm. They can't find a passing game rhythm yet, then it's going to be a problem. They're good. It seems like they're really missing Arthur Smith right now as their OC. This new guy might not be working out, so I'm still skeptical. We haven't seen it yet, but you have to imagine that Julio Jones is going to get at least 15. So at least a decent flex option, in my opinion.
All right, and the last one I have here is actually 2 of them. Deontay Harris and Marquez Callaway for the New Orleans Saints against the Washington football team. Huge deep league flex picks here, and Deontay Harris and Marquez Callaway against Washington. Washington's given up 10 passing touchdowns on the season, which is tied for 29th, as well as almost 300 yards a game. Harris and Callaway have been seeing the bulk of the targets, excluding what they throw to Alvin Kamara. So I think they're both, as well as Jameis Winston for that matter, should have a pretty good game here.
Yeah, this one's tough, right? Because these receivers have been so inconsistent up to this point. We haven't seen a whole lot from them, and so it's tough to put them in there. But I could understand, like you said, in deeper leagues, if you need somebody to fill in with all the injuries that have happened over the last couple of weeks, you might need somebody to slide in. It's a good matchup, so I could definitely see it. Marquez Callaway would be the one I'd feel more comfortable with, I feel like. But yeah, like I said, it's just I'm skeptical on him, but I could definitely see somebody having to slide him in there this week.
All right, that wraps up my stardoms wide receivers for week 5. We'll move on to the situms on the wide receiver end. The first one I'm going to start with is Devonte Smith for the Philadelphia Eagles against the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers have had one of the best secondaries in the league, only giving up 156 yards a game. I don't like the matchup for Devonte Smith or any Eagles receivers for that matter.
Yeah, it's tough for me to say to sit Devonte Smith, because he's so good, right? But we haven't seen him put up the consistent numbers either. He's had a couple good games, couple lackluster games. I think Devonte Smith should get enough targets to at least be a flex option. But with the matchup, I could definitely understand if people had a different option, somebody that they might feel has a better matchup this week, then I could see them sitting him. But if I had him on my team, it'd be hard for me to sit him this week.
Right. Well, the next one on my list here is Odell Beckham Jr. for the Cleveland Browns against the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers also have a very good secondary and are currently number 5 on my list of best passing defenses. The Browns are going to rely heavily on their run game here, so I'm going to sit Odell Beckham.
That's how I feel too. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a huge passing day, especially after what we saw from Baker. Maybe they want to get Baker some more throws and get him into a rhythm, but I don't think it's going to be the Chargers that you do that against. We talked about it with Nick Chubb earlier. The Chargers can be ran on, and I think they're going to lean on that. So OBJ would definitely be a guy that I'd stay away from.
All right, and my last one here is the entire Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiving core against the Denver Broncos. Like I said earlier, the Steelers offense is just stagnant, and their entire wide receiving core has been dealing with injuries the last few weeks. Plus, the Denver Broncos defense has only given up 3 passing touchdowns on the year, tied for second best in the league behind. You care to take a guess here?
The Bills?
No, the New York Jets, who have only given up 2.
Jeez, who would have guessed?
I know, right? But anyways, I don't like the matchup here for the Steelers at all. So I'm sitting any and all of their wide receivers here.
Yeah, the only one that I would even consider as a flex option right now is Deontay Johnson because he gets so many freaking targets. But outside of that, yeah, absolutely stay away from any and all pass catchers for the Steelers.
All right. That's all I got for the sit-ems this week on wide receivers. That's all we have for you guys for this week. We appreciate you all tuning in. Hopefully, Heff and I were able to provide you with some insight to help give you a little bit of an advantage in your fantasy league. Just a reminder, you can hop into our weekly Pigskin Pick'em contest where you can directly compete with Brad, Hefe, and myself. You can find the link on our Facebook, Twitter page at Horsemen Sports. If you're able to beat us out on the season, we'll get you on the podcast. As always, special shout out to our WUBI live listeners for tuning in. You can catch the Horsemen Pro Football Talk podcast and Fantasy Central on WUBI live every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. The app is available for download in the App Store, or you can visit wubi.live for more information. Hefe, you got any parting words you want to throw out here?
No, the only thing I have for everybody is a little bit of Monday Night Miracle that happened in one of my leagues. There's I join random leagues every year, do some random drafts. Last night I was going against a guy who had Darren Waller playing, and I had Justin Herbert and Jared Cook playing. And Darren Waller has 4 catches, 50 yards, and a touchdown, right? Puts this guy at 155.32. But Justin Herbert ends up with 21.28, and Jared Cook did better than Darren Waller, just barely, had 19 points. I beat this guy by a half a point because of that performance.
Wow.
Yes, sir.
Very nice.
Let's go.
Very nice. Can't get any better than that. Unless you're absolutely destroying somebody, but that's awesome.
Pretty much, putting 200 on somebody, pretty nice.
All right. Well, that's all we got for you guys. Good luck to you all this weekend, and we'll see you next week.